Welcome back to the Jiu Jitsu Oracle. It's Ross and Calum. There's a million Jiu Jitsu things going on this weekend, so let's just crack on with the first thing we have to talk about, which is a review of the IBJJF Absolute Grand Prix, dominated by Kaynan Duarte. Won all three of his matches pretty convincingly to take the absolute no-gi crown to go along with the gi title that he had previously won. Calum, what did you think of Kaynan's performance?
Yeah, so no surprise to see Kaynan coming away with a win. Some cool things that I picked up on watching. I really liked how he wasn't messing about from the start. He was very adamant on getting a score straight away, whether that was like pulling guard on Dante and coming up as soon as possible, or literally like split second at the match in the final against Bedoni, just coming right in on a single leg. And that's something that I noticed him in the Polaris tournament as well that he did a couple months ago. Same thing, like with Jason Rao, he just shot straight in on a takedown, like no messing about. And I think that really set the tone for the rest of the match in that he wasn't rushed. He was quite relaxed. Like he got the score on the board. He was on top. He wasn't stalling or anything. He was very like pushing forward, constant pressure, but he wasn't in a rush. He was very relaxed. And I think that allowed him to employ his passing style of just like constant forward pressure, nice and relaxed, allowing him to like not overreact and deal with things as they come and just do what Kaynan does, which is just solid top pressure consistently over time.
I think an athlete has control over the first interaction and then thereafter maybe 10 to 15 seconds into the match. So I don't like to see athletes come out and faff around and not be sure as to what they're doing. So I agree, coming out, getting straight onto a single leg or getting straight into a guard pull, that's the way to go. Set the tone early.
And it allowed him to be on cruise control pretty much for the rest of the matches, as opposed to being a bit lackadaisical at the start, which you could say maybe Giancarlo was at the start of that match, like not immediately getting ready to defend a takedown. So because he was switched on in that first part of the match, that allowed him to kind of be on cruise control. We know Kaynan's hard to score on, hard to get anything going. So like him being in that relaxed nature, knowing that he was up and there was no rush, it allowed him to just deal with things as they come. He didn't have to rush anything. He didn't have to overreact, and that just allowed him to play into his game.
Yeah, he's a great front runner, Kaynan. Once he gets ahead, he's hard to score on. I thought we mentioned before how he might deal with any leg entanglements that people get into, particularly if Bedoni got near one or Kaynan's second match was against Dante Leon, and he's a threat from positions where he can get heel hooks. But I thought Kaynan's, I'll call it leg admin, as he was passing, was very, very good. So immediately, anytime a little threat appeared, he addressed it right away and then got back to the shape that he wanted to be in for passing. So I thought he was brilliant in and around the legs as he was passing guard.
Yeah, it was kind of like a relaxed but like switched on sort of mindset. So like he wasn't freaking out in any of those situations, but like immediately he was like reacting to it and doing the right thing and dealing with it and not letting it become a bigger problem than it needed to be.
And I thought he got to half guard in the matches and was very dominant when he got there. But I think it's a misconception that you force half guard, because if you try and force half guard, then you give people an action that they can react to. You give them a lot of momentum that they can use against you, and then that's where they can get underneath you and get into legs, for example. So I thought he did well to take half guard when it was there, and then once he'd set up camp in half guard, he was incredibly hard to shift. But it's not like he just dove in. He took his time. Classic Kaynan.
Made them carry his weight in head. Yeah. That's these kind of things.
Yeah. So it was Bedoni in the final. Prior to that, he had Dante Leon, and then in his first match, he had Hyson Rida, and he looked brilliant throughout. So he won the title, and then he mentioned afterwards that he would like a rematch against Nicholas Meregali, a match that he had recently lost. How do you think Kaynan would fare against Meregali this time, Calum, and do you think he would do anything different?
Yeah, so like I was just talking about him being almost on cruise control a little bit and very relaxed through the matches, I was thinking to myself whether that was an adjustment to his match with Meregali, because it kind of seemed like he blew his load a little bit in the first part of the match with Meregali. Obviously, he looked good. I think he got the takedown of Meregali. Things were looking good for him, and then Meregali managed to get his way back to the feet And from there, Meregali kind of took over the pace of the match. So hopefully, well, I don't know, obviously he might think that that isn't the best thing to do against Meregali. Maybe he thinks you need to kind of take it to him early. But I think the pace that we saw from him in these matches would potentially do him a better favour against Meregali. So that's like an adjustment, just overall strategy and pace. And I don't know whether much technical adjustments have been made in that time or not. I guess we'll see if the match happens, but definitely with the pacing, because I think that was a big thing with the last match. He spent a lot of his energy getting the takedown early in the match, and then towards the second half of the match, when he can keep that top position against Meregali, that's kind of when we saw him starting to fade a little bit in the match.
Yeah, I think I'm just remembering what the commentators were talking about during the Grand Prix with reference to the previous Meregali match, and I think they made reference to the fact that Meregali got to top position when Kaynan decided to go on a leg.
I think I remember Meregali finishing like a leg drag sort of pass, and I think a lot of the time people, instead of kind of framing and recovering or turtling, they focus a bit too much and trying to even yank that leg through, which can be super difficult if someone's putting weight through their foot. I think that might have been what happened with that.
I just think though this time there's no way Kaynan takes bottom position.
No.
In the match. Like, he'd even be better just standing up again.
Yeah, I mean, he's probably one of the best guys in the world at wrestling up. That would maybe be something that he would momentarily be happy to sit down to set up a wrestle up. But yeah, for a prolonged period of time, like getting put flat on his back, I don't think he would really accept those kind of positions. Potentially go to his butt, attempt to wrestle up and use that to come back to the feet. But I agree, I don't think he's wanting to really play a consistent bottom game against Meregali.
Yeah, he sweeps very early.
Yeah.
Did that in the Grand Prix. Sat down, swept very early, got to top. Yeah, you don't want Nicholas Meregali on top of you for an extended period of time. Like, his top game's improved massively since he started training at New Wave, so I don't think you want to be underneath that for any period of time, much like you don't want to be underneath Kaynan.
Yeah,
so,
and I don't know if Kaynan could beat Meregali in the way that Meregali beat Kaynan, but I don't think Kaynan's that bothered. Like, if we look back at their gi matches, I think they are 2-1. I think Meregali 1-2, Kaynan 1-1, or maybe the other way around. But anyway, Meregali, one of his wins, he like just completely obliterated Kaynan. And when Kaynan won, he just kind of got up an advantage or 2 points and got the win. And Kaynan's quite happy to do that in a lot of his matches. We saw that in the Grand Prix as well, especially when there's like 40k on the line. But I think that would be more kind of Kaynan's route to victory. I don't really see him dominating Meregali in the same way that Meregali can do to Kaynan, but it's sport, and at the end of the day, a win's a win. So if Kaynan can do that to Meregali, that's fair enough.
Yeah. Meregali has submitted Kaynan, choke from the back.
That might
2019.
Yeah, that'll be the gi match that he just blew Kaynan out, and I think Kaynan either 1 or 2 wins over him in the gi that were pretty close matches.
Yeah, I can see here that Kaynan's got a referee decision victory over Meregali.
Yep.
Anyway, so moving on, some of the undercard really caught our attention. I say undercard, let's say complimentary fights to the tournament.
Yeah.
For the caliber of grappler in them, it wasn't really the undercard. So let's just run through 4 standout performances that we saw in some of the other matches. We told you before, watch out for Andy Murasaki. His top game's amazing. He had a super impressive win. Calum, what did you think of Andy?
Yeah, so Andy Murasaki just doing Andy Murasaki things, coming up on that come up swoop. It was a really nice overall sequence. He kind of hit like an overhead, so I call it like a berimbolo shortcut, where you kind of end up in a bolo, but you've not had to do the inversion because you've put them overhead. He looked like he was chasing the bolo or trying to come up and sweep from there, and then as Mateus centered up, he managed to get his legs to the inside position and get to that kind of single leg X come up sweep, which he's so good at. I think the good thing about that as well, you've already got kind of grips on the gi pan, so we saw him immediately going into the pass and from there going side to side and eventually getting the pass and dominating from there.
Andy Murasaki doing Andy Murasaki things. Kaynan Duarte doing Kaynan Duarte things.
Some great stand-up in the gi with a lot of those matches from Aiga and Kaynan, which is great to see. Obviously, Kynan's been working a stand-up for the no-gi, so maybe we'll see that translate over to his tournaments in the gi. We saw it in this match, definitely.
So, you mentioned Cade Ruotolo there. as well. He had a couple of great takedowns in his match. One, a double leg, and then the second, very similar to the takedown that Kaynan hit. And if you get a same side collar grip on the gi, so that's essentially my right hand holding the left collar of my partner, it's not as dominant a grip as a cross collar grip. But with the same side collar grip, a great thing you can do is switch across, dive onto a single leg or an ankle pick with your partner and start to work on that. So the finishes to the takedowns that Kaynan and Cade hit were both slightly different, but they were both the same setup essentially. It's like get a same side collar and then get across, grab the single leg and go from there.
It was a really cool way that Cade broke the grip as well. Sometimes if it doesn't always stop it, but sometimes if they also have that same kind of mirror grip on you, it can make it hard to shoot the single just because they can control the distance a bit. But we saw Cade kind of ducking his head under the grip, twisting his hand up, and then that made it easier for him just to pop the grip off and then immediately going into that sweep single off of the collar takedown. So that was cool to see.
Yeah, so Cade looked very, very good, especially with his takedowns. And the last person to flag up that looked really, really good is Zach Kayna, who had an impressive win over Shane Jabil Hill-Taylor.
Yep, so close match, but quite impressive just because Shane is a black belt world champion. He's not won it the past couple of years, but still, like of recent years, he is a black belt world champion. So for Zach to come into that match and get a win, regardless of how close it was quite impressive to see that he's like getting up on that level now. So it'll be good to see him in some of the big tournaments coming up, like Ams and Worlds.
All right, a couple other things coming out of the event. One, you need to get a bigger mat, because the amount of time where there was not much happening in a match, and then something started to happen, but it happened out of bounds, then it was brought back into the middle, it started again on the feet, one competitor was given an advantage, and then we're back to that part of guys wrestling and try to get going again. Super frustrating to watch, especially in super fights.
Yeah.
Calum.
I think it's kind of understandable in the tournament situation where you've got 8 mats kind of filling up the whole stadium or whatever it is you're renting out for the event. But when you've just got one mat on and the whole focus is on that mat, there's no excuse not to just completely fill out the floor, really, as long as you can still get your seating and obviously to sell tickets. So it would be nice to see not just IBJJF, but a lot of promotions in general just prioritizing a bit more mat space and letting the action flow a bit more instead of this kind of start-stop that we see in a lot of these shows.
So, do we need the karate combat pit to solve the problem? Do we need to have a push-out rule? So, for example, you push your partner out, you push your opponent out of bounds, you get a point, and that forces people to get in the middle.
More style.
Pardon?
More style.
Do the IBJJF need to have their first sort of matted area that signifies that you're heading towards out of bounds, and then have a second one? So like the referee gets very vocal if you cross the first threshold. If they're making the mat bigger, maybe they have like the blue mats and then the yellow square, and then that's your sort of danger zone where you get brought back in. Do they need a second one? And it's like as you enter the first one, the referee really starts like telling you to get back in the middle. I don't know, but they need to do something, because especially when you're watching these 1v1 matches that are 10 minutes, when something starts to happen, it should be allowed to keep happening. If the action stops, then that might be the end of interesting action in the match. And like, we're not watching tournament play here. It's like we're watching two guys who we really want to see go at each other, have a great match. So I think when environment causes a problem, there needs to be some adjustments made.
Yeah, no, great.
Okay, second B in the bonnet, flow grappling, sort out your website and your app. When an event has happened, when I go onto my computer the next day to watch the event, I should literally be able to click one button to open your website or the app, and then click another button, and I get a replay of the event happening in front of me right away. I shouldn't have to scroll through your website looking for the replay while I'm trying to avoid spoilers.
Yeah.
Now,
On you go.
you're irked by that as well, aren't you?
Yeah, I mean, it was hard enough to find just the full 3-4 hour replay of the event, and as well as that, like, how hard is it to splice up the event and just separate the matches? And okay, here's Tynan's match, here's Cade's match, here's Jean Carlo's first match. Like, I don't think that's too difficult from a professional media company to do either. So yeah, those two things would be nice to see.
Now, thank you, Full Grappling, for showing the event. It's great that we're able to see it, but there can be some improvements made there. And I am quite the consumer of sport. I have NFL Game Pass, I have NBA League Pass, I have Triller TV so I can watch All Elite Wrestling. All of these apps and websites, as soon as an event's happened, you can open them up, and then the first thing you're able to do is click on the event and you get a replay right away, spoiler free. So if you're in doubt, Flo, have a look at some of these other products that are out there from some of the leading sports leagues in the world and see how they do it.
Is the issue jiu-jitsu guys in general? Is this leak at the flow grappling as well?
Perhaps. But let's save the rant about jits guys for another podcast. Or it might be an ongoing segment in future podcasts. Let's get back on track, because there's another huge event happening Monday night. Fight Pass Invitational 6, headlined by Craig Jones against Rafael Lovato. Let's talk about that match first, and then we'll run through some of the other matches on the card. So what do you think is going to happen in Craig return to Fight Pass Invitational?
Yeah, so the result obviously can only speculate on, but the thing I'm most excited to see is whether Craig wants to stand and wrestle with Lovato, which is what he's been doing more recently. He's obviously put out a lot of kind of content on not just like attacking wrestling, but like fence wrestling, some like get up, some like wrestling based stuff. And it seems like his competition game as well is going a lot more wrestling based. So it'll be interesting to see if he wants to stand with Lovato or whether he's going to go back to kind of classic Craig and full guard and go for his leg lock attacks.
Right. Before I run through the rest of the card, like, follow, and subscribe, particularly because we should have a really interesting interview with a top competitor coming out next week. And I don't know exactly the day that it's going to drop, but if you follow us, if you subscribe to the channel, then you'll get a notification right away. And it's definitely going to be worth listening to if you are interested in competitive grappling and what it takes to win an ADCC trials. So, former trials winner should be on the pod next week. Follow us and you'll find out who it is. Now, moving on to other matches on the card. Nicky Rod against Roberto Jimenez. Nicholas Meregali against Matheus Diniz. They're the next two matches that are sort of headlining the event. Anything to look out for in those tussles?
So Nicky Rod versus Roberto. I think they're 1-1. I think Roberto got a win over Nicky Rod. I remember in lockdown there was a lot of stuff going on, kind of no gi shows. I think it was something like Third Coast. It was one of these promotions that I think isn't doing any events anymore, but I think it was a decision or a points victory that Roberto won, and then obviously one of the last fight passes we've seen Nicky Rod getting a win over Roberto. I think it was again a decision. It was in that tournament that he eventually beat Big Dan in. So I think that shows this can go either way. It's a bit of an odd match to make specifically all right in a tournament setting, which I think the two previous were. So like if there's an absolute tournament and there's this sort of like weight disparity, that just is what it is. But to specifically match up two guys that have got like a 30-40 pound weight difference, I'm not sure, a bit odd, but sure Roberto was up for the match. But anyway, I think stylistically, I think a lot of movement and chaos is to be expected. Both guys move really well. Nicky Rod obviously really good at wrestling. Roberto Jimenez is quite happy to stand on the feet as well, but also has a really good guard and just generally very good at moving. And I think we should see a lot of fun scrambles from that match.
And interesting to see Meregali back doing no-gi against Matheus Diniz. We've not seen too much from Matheus recently. We've seen a lot of Nicholas Meregali. Do you expect to see more of what Meregali's been doing
Yeah, when I saw this match, I think Meregali now, he's kind of up there with, I think the guys his size that are like really up there. Obviously, we spoke about Kaynan. These guys like around the 100 kilo mark that are really like top class competitors. So we've got Kaynan and we've got Gordon as well. I think Meregali's kind of up there with those two guys. And if you look at Matheus Denise's match with Kaynan and Gordon, they weren't really competitive. In different ways, Kaynan got into the legs quite early and got a quick submission, and then Gordon kind of just toying with him a little bit, which he's been doing in a lot of his matches recently. So I don't know. I don't feel like this match is going to be the most competitive. There's a big size difference, and as well, just like the general kind of amount of competitions Meregali's been doing and how he's been looking in these competitions. Since Matheus Denise won ADCC, I think his competition frequency went down a lot. At the last ADCC, they got to the second round, getting put out by Giancarlo. So I don't know, we might see something surprising from Matheus, but I don't see this match being overly competitive, to be honest. What about you?
I think we'll see Meregali continuing to do what he's been doing.
Yeah.
Looking great and being very strong on top. If Matheus can keep it to a wrestling match for as long as possible, I think that's going to be his best chance. But Meregali's takedowns are improving as well, so yeah, I fancy Meregali quite strongly in this. Just on the Craig Jones thing, because I had this in my mind to say, and then I went on a little sidetrack because I always forget to tell people to like and subscribe, and then I get to the end of the episode and I shake my head and I think I've got a lot to learn about this podcasting game. But coming out of the last ADCC, Craig had a good win against Felipe Pena, and then haven't really seen loads of him. He did the quintet tournament with the B Team Bulls, and then he had a match on Polaris against UFC fighter Gerald Mearshart, and then he had the match on Karate Combat against Philip Rowe, also a UFC fighter. So, like, I think Rafael Lovato was like his first like serious test in a while, and we've heard Craig talk about whether he's going to do ADCC this year, and I think like this match against Lovato will be a good sign as to whether his game is where it needs to be to do an ADCC, notwithstanding whether he might do it for the money and the prestige at stake, which Craig's talked about. He's given his opinions on the pay that's available to athletes for doing an ADCC and whether that's enticing enough for him to do it. But I just want to see the match against Lovato to see where Craig's game is at this stage, just about 5 months, 6 months out from the finals, because Lovato last time at the ADCC performed really well. Only lost narrowly to Kaynan Duarte on a referee's decision, and he lost on a penalty point to Meregali. So, you know, if he, like you've just said, Meregali and Duarte are sort of at the top end of the no-gi grapplers. So if Lovato can hang with them, then, you know, he could ask some questions of Craig, and it will be interesting to see like how Craig performs against someone like Lovato, because I think if Craig's serious about doing ADCC, he needs to be beating people of the caliber of Rafael Lovato, because I think if Craig does do ADCC this time, it's to win ADCC, despite his gimmick of trying to come second all the time. So what do you think from that dynamic in terms of like seeing where Craig is against another like good, seasoned, experienced grappler?
Yeah, I agree. That's like a kind of bare minimum that he should be looking to kind of win this match against Lovato to consider doing ADCC. But even if he does win, I don't know if that will kind of end up with him deciding to do ADCC. I don't think I think anything less than a silver would probably be like a net negative just in his kind of overall perception, and then silver's not going to really do much for him aside from kind of carry on the joke. And I think getting gold would be a really kind of good cherry on top for his career. Finally, kind of getting the win that I think we both agree that he has the potential to do. And I think it would be a shame to see him not live up to that potential. I think at 88, definitely. I think at 99, he is going to really struggle to get past guys like Kaynan, like we saw last time. But I think if he's willing to take the camp seriously, make the cut to 88, do all the strength and conditioning work, because we know skill-wise, like he's definitely able to do that and win 88, and I think that would be really interesting to see, and I think he can beat a lot of the guys in that division, and on his day, win the whole division.
That's why I'm interested to see this match against Lovato. It's not necessarily like skill-wise where his game's at, but it's more, we've seen him going away to corner Volkanovski, and then we've seen him take the odd grappling match here or there, and we've seen him away in Asia doing camps and stuff like that. So it's like, it's more from that perspective, because if you are going to do ADCC, you really need to be like in top athletic shape to get there. To get far in the ADCC and to win it. So yeah, it's more from that perspective. I want to see where his game's at. I've got no doubts over his skill level, but I think it's like having the athletic ability to implement that skill level, shall we say. And if he's not quite on it from that point of view, he's going to find it hard against Lovato, because it's very solid.
I think the competitive drive as well to dig deep. I think you almost see him in some of these matches, like against Kaynan. When you're going for like a no-gi Ezekiel instead of retaining your guard, is that a bit of like breaking mentally? Like, that's not really the right thing to be doing against a guy of Kaynan's level. So I don't know if that's an issue as well. But yeah, like that might be something we see in this match, that he's still got that competitive drive. Maybe not. I think that's a big part to play, as well as the athleticism, because skill-wise, he definitely has the capabilities to win. It's just those other factors that we're questioning whether he's got.
Very deep card. I'll run through a couple of other matches, and then Calum, if you want to flag anything up that you're interested in seeing, let us know. We've got Mason Fowler against Pedro Mourinho. We've got Victor Hugo, Roosevelt Souza, Ronaldo Jr. against Cody Steele, and then J-Rod against Matteo Cadona. Calum, anything there that you're particularly interested in seeing?
Yeah, I think Pedro versus Mason Fowler is going to be a really good one. I think, again, those two guys have definitely got the potential to win that 88 kilo division as well. We flagged Pedro up in the last episode as a guy to watch in the 88 kilo division for the trials. So unless Pedro's doing the trials as we speak and he's nipping on the private jet over to Vegas, I don't know if he's pulled out of this and he's decided to do the next trials, or maybe he's actually gotten an invite. We don't really know behind the scenes what's going on there, but definitely really good competitor in that division, as well as Mason Fowler, so I'm looking forward to seeing that match.
I want to see Victor Hugo again. Love watching his all-round game. Think he's kind of like on the cusp of that category that you suggested, that elite level no-gi competitor. Yeah. I think the more Victor plays no-gi, the more he's going to push himself towards that. Still, like, he's absolutely at the elite level of the gi game. But yeah, really looking forward to seeing him. Love watching his style of jiu-jitsu. And I think this time as well, talking of contenders, if Gordon isn't in the weight division, he only does the super fight, which could conceivably happen given Gordon's taking a step back from competing due to his health issues with his stomach. Victor, I think, would be, one of the favourites for that division, particularly given how he gave a decent showing against Gordon last time, who otherwise looked pretty untouchable. So I think seeing Victor's growth, and then maybe that culminating in the title in August. I'm excited to watch his journey and progression in no-gi. I think Ronaldo Jr. against Cody Steele could be a tear-up as well. And obviously a J-Rod match could be a tear-up. So I think there could be a lot of action there. There's a couple other events on this weekend. Of course there is. Everyone who runs event seems to have scheduled one for this weekend, which is great for grapplers because there's so many chances to compete. And I think you were saying if anyone was able to provide a statistic, it would be incredibly interesting to us. But there must be a huge percentage of like very, very good black belt competitors who are out in action this weekend. Somewhere around 50%, you thought.
Yeah.
There's a show in the UK, GrappleFest. We have Keith Krikorian against Dominic Mejia headlining. Other notables on the card include Luke Griffith, Adel Fornerino, who we've mentioned before, and Helena Crevar from New Wave. Calum, do you have any thoughts on the main event?
Yeah, so I think this is a rematch that we saw from the last trials, Dominic coming through in that match. So it'll be interesting to see that rematch. We've not seen too much of Dominic Mejia versus like the top class competitors. Obviously, he did beat Keith at the trials, so we'll see if maybe that was Keith overlooking him a bit, because obviously that was kind of Dominic's breakout performance. So it'll be interesting to see in a slightly longer format without points on the line how that match is going to go. So I'll be looking forward to seeing that for sure.
Over in Brazil, we have ADXC, and there are a whole host of exceptional Brazilian grapplers on the card, headlined by Jansen Gomes against Bruno Lima. I've not seen Jansen compete for a while, and we'd suggested before that come IBJJF Worlds time, he's going to be one to definitely watch. And we were suggesting that Kaynan Duarte could have a couple of guys who he's on a collision course with, Jansen Gomes being one of them, in a rematch from the final last time that Jansen won. Kaynan would be gunning for revenge. So, yeah, really interesting to see Jansen again, and see if his game's changed at all, if he's implemented anything, because it's not really been on my radar for a while. Have you seen him at all compete, or?
Not really, no. Yeah, I think the last two times was the one in London that he did in the middle heavy division that was like super stacked. I think that was just before Worlds though. That I can think of. Nothing really big since Worlds.
And who else might we see in there as well as Kaynan and Jansen?
Interesting no-gi match between Levi Jones-Leary and Jonathan Gracie, so that'll be really cool to watch. Really like watching Levi in the no-gi scene. I think he's quite creative with a lot of things he does with the bolos and the Xanadu guards and stuff, so that'll be an interesting match to see. Both got an opponent in common in Oliver Taza. I think they both had a match with on Who's Number One, so that'll be cool to see those two guys square off.
Yeah, sorry, I was just saying before, I agree that match will be interesting to watch. I was thinking to myself, who else could be in the mix there? And we'd mentioned previously, so we might have Kaynan Duarte, we might have Mika Galvao in the division, we might have Jansen Gomes, and you never know, Tyro Toll might jump in. So,
or Cade.
Like,
and Cade said after that Grand Prix was wanting to do Worlds, so I might see the pair of them, maybe in different divisions, maybe in the same division, we'll see.
Yeah, but I think we said before, if you have that four of Jansen, Mika, Kaynan, and Ty, I don't think it's better than that for a final four in a tournament. So again, interesting to see where Jansen is with that potentially happening. I agree. Jonatas against Levi Jones-Leary, probably the match on the card that like piques my interest the most in terms of like a competitive battle and who's going to come out on top. Some other notable names include Felipe Andrew, who has a match against Rayron Gracie, and Fabricio Andre, who has Ruan Alvarenga. So if there's anything on that card that is worth tracking down, we'll let you know on the next episode of the Jiu Jitsu Oracle. There's one more event happening that is worth noting, and that is the Aiga qualifiers that are taking place in Turkey. Particularly notable from a European grappling perspective. Calum, I know you're keen to follow one team's progress in the event. Tell us about it, please.
Yes, there's one team labelled Euro Trash. Got some of the really good competitors from the no-gi scene in Europe. So obviously it goes by weight divisions. There's kind of one athlete representing each weight division, and they'll fight the corresponding athlete from the other team on that weight division. So I don't know the exact weights for everyone, but I presume we'll have Shea. He's going to be the under 60 guy. I think he walks around pretty light around that weight anyway, so he'll be the under 60 guy. Probably Sam McNally would be the 65 guy. Ash, I presume, is going to be 70, although those two guys could be opposite ways round. But anyway, we've got those two guys in. We've got McTavish, who I always like to see. Always like to get some more footage on him to watch. Got Owen O'Flanagan as well as Jed Hugh, and then there might be one more guy that I'm missing out, but overall, really good team from some of the top guys in Europe. I'm not too familiar with a lot of the other teams, so definitely expect them to be quite a heavy favourite in that, although a lot of these kind of Russian, Middle Eastern teams can have a lot of really high-level grapplers that we don't know about, as we saw given a hard time to Team Adolfo and some of the other Aiga events. So potentially there'll be some guys that we're not aware of right now that can give those guys a hard time, but I do expect those guys to have a bit of a easier time with some of the lower level teams that they're going to go against. But either way, it's going to be definitely some good matches to watch.
We've got Eurotrash, under 60, Shea Montague, 65, Sam McNally, 70, Ash Williams and Thomas Tovey, 76, Matej Szynski, 83, Jed Hugh, 91, Owen O'Flanagan, and over 91, Marcin Musielewicz.
All right, okay. That's a really good team then. Yeah.
Yeah. So pretty much very, very good across the board for Team Eurotrash. So I don't think they're going to be lacking in any area.
Yeah.
So some of the teams, they've kind of got one or two standouts, and then, we're not really sure about the rest of the people.
Yeah.
Team.
Get through the trials. I think they're one of the teams that can give Adolfo a good run. So hopefully we get to see that down the timeline. Eurotrash versus Team Adolfo. I think there'll be some interesting matchups between the weight classes on that.
Until next time, enjoy all the grappling on this weekend. And we'll be back to give you as much of a rundown as we can in the near future. Like and subscribe so you get it as soon as it comes out.